I would like to now call upon our final speaker, Barrister Taimur Malik, who will explore how legal technology, public-private collaborations, and policy reform can make mediation more accessible, especially in politically sensitive and cross-border environments. I also just heard Barrister Taimur on a TV program talking about the Indus Waters Treaty, so if you would like to shed some light on that, please do.
Thank you, Nanda, for a very kind and generous introduction earlier. That's our Dr. It's a pleasure to be here on the panel with you. I think the two presentations have very comprehensively covered the topic of mediation and its role in the South Asian context, as well as its role in the Pakistani legal system. And I couldn't agree more with Justice Karim's suggestion to the Chinese Center to perhaps leverage the existence or the earlier existence of the commercial courts in Punjab for the resolution of BRI-related disputes. I would like to, I think the panel discussion should be interesting afterwards, so I won't take much time, but a few things that I would like to add to what the earlier panelists have already mentioned. And then we will take the benefit and advantage of a couple of other international lawyers in the audience. Of course, Sikandar is here, but I also support Aisha here from our side. So perhaps the panel discussion could be a bit more interesting, hopefully. Look, Justice Karim also mentioned that mediation is different from arbitration. I think at times this is not clearly understood. Arbitration can be great for the lawyers on both sides, as has been the Pakistan experience, can be great for arbitrators, but it's not necessarily cheaper or quicker than litigation, whether before Pakistani courts or the UK courts and so on. And if we just link it with Pakistan's international experience, you're probably all familiar with the Reko Diq arbitrations. I mean, Reko Diq is now finally a live project, but the arbitration is never really finished. You would have heard of judiciaries, in my opinion, pretty wrong involvement in the whole Reko Diq dispute during former Chief Justice Iftikhar Chaudhry's tenure, which led to perhaps the delay of the Reko Diq project. And the arbitration started before that and since then, and were ongoing. And at the end of the day, what has really resolved the issue and put the project back on track, hopefully for the benefit of the people of Balochistan and generally for Pakistan, is really mediation. Through different players, both in terms of international organizations and international state players. Pakistan also had another large arbitration claim in play, which was Karkey, in relation to a Turkish nuclear-powered ship which was supposed to provide electricity to Pakistan. And that dispute, again, the arbitration was still ongoing and was eventually settled through mediation, led by our players from our end, but also the involvement of the Turkish president and the Turkish government, presumably, between the Pakistani side and Karkey. So mediation has benefits. Mediation can be quicker, certainly cheaper, and has worked for Pakistan in the past. Now, if we see how mediation has been or can be used for conflict resolution, which is a very important thing for people in South Asia, especially after the Indian Prime Minister's statement yesterday at a political rally, there is no more important and urgent time for mediation of issues between the two South Asian countries. But it was UK which mediated the dispute between two Portuguese-speaking countries, Portugal and Brazil, in 1865. It was other countries who mediated the Eritrea-Ethiopia dispute. It was mediation, whether it is a buzzword now since we came into the profession, but certainly it was in play when the Hague Conventions were drafted in the 18th century. It was part of the League of Nations Charter. It is certainly part of the UN Charter, which we all follow till date. And in Article 33 of the UN Charter specifically lists mediation as one of the possibilities through which dispute resolution should should take place between member states. The UN Charter generally calls for dispute resolution through peaceful means, of which certainly mediation would be one part. And so why should there be a role of mediation between India and Pakistan? I mean, we are two of the very few nuclear powered countries in the world. As we saw just this month, we are in the same month of May when effectively, a war which could have gone anywhere took place between these two countries. We rose through the escalation ladder. Those of you who might be familiar with the nuclear escalation ladder process. We went through it within a matter of days to a point where perhaps the use of tactical nuclear weapons wasn't anymore an unthinkable situation. Pakistan believes, and rightly so, that Indus Waters Treaty is not just a treaty dispute. It's not just a issue of whether water will flow, whether data sharing will be done during the flooding season or not. It's effectively a right of life issue. Pakistan is an agricultural country. Pakistan is ground zero for climate change, that's widely acknowledged across the world. Pakistan is going to face water shortage. They say generally that the future wars in the world will be water wars. Pakistan, unfortunately, is going to be ground zero for that again. So, without resolution of the Indus Waters Treaty, which earlier withstood the pressures of various wars and conflicts between the two countries, there can't be lasting peace. As Dr. Joe said, that you need to raise the cost of conflict in order to have lasting peace. And how do you raise the cost of conflict for a country like India, in this case? It's a very important point about raising the cost of conflict, and that is what eventually helps any mediating party to bring parties onto the table, whether it's in a commercial context or if it's in the context of two states. But in this case, Pakistan has a FDI, unfortunately, of only a few hundred million or sometimes $1 billion or $2 billion a year. India, on the other hand, is aspiring to reach eventually $100 billion a year. No foreign investors are going to go to a country which is at war with its neighbor, with its nuclear-powered neighbor. So definitely, Pakistan has certain leverage to play in terms of raising the cost of conflict, and I think that was partly, the reason how Pakistan acted and why it acted. The Kashmir dispute remains unresolved. There have been, and some of us in this room have been part of those track 2, track 1.5 and whatnot efforts between the two countries. Mediation can be and has to be backed by human contact on both sides. And a lot needs to be done before a third party can play an effective mediatory role. Pakistan and India have discussed in the past, at least between, let's say, international lawyers, political scientists, professors, and so on, that there should be freedom of movement between, the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Azad Jammu and Kashmir. There should be perhaps limited freedom of trade between the two territories. Kartarpur corridor, which Pakistan, on the Punjab side, developed, and allows access to six pilgrims to come to Kartarpur, is a very fine example of what can be done if countries put their mind to something. So there are mechanisms through which platforms can be created for a more sustainable, globally mediated solution. Pakistan and India are both facing insurgencies. What is happening in Balochistan with foreign support, perhaps, is not anything short of that. What happens in various Indian states, is a homegrown insurgency. Can countries like that afford to be at conflict forever? Not necessarily, and hopefully not. So, there is every reason why mediation should take place and should be at the forefront of conflict resolution between countries like Pakistan and India. There's also the subject says, they say always read the question again and again, and in this case the title of the seminar. It also says beyond South Asia, a role of mediation in South Asia, South Asian peace building and beyond. I mean, it would be amiss to not mention Gaza today. Right? So what is happening there? If anywhere, mediation needs to play a role, and US needs to play a role, European Union needs to play a role, the Chinese need to play a role, is resolving that issue. At the moment, it's a humanitarian crisis, it's a genocide, it's something that now the world powers and the world academic legal circles are recognizing. And so mediation has to be something that has to be, I'm sure it's already in play, but has to come into effect pretty quickly to save precious lives, and from it to become something that we only talk about in legal and political and international political circles 10, 20 years from now and try to hold those in power there today accountable. Mediation can still play a very constructive role. In terms of technology and how it can play a role and has played a role, I would like to mention, like the commercial courts were mentioned, Pakistan Pakistan adopted the Scandinavian concept of ombudsperson offices or mohtasib offices in the country a couple of decades ago. Till a decade or so ago, Pakistan had effectively a federal ombudsperson and ombudspersons in Punjab and Sindh. The ombudsperson offices, you don't need to really engage a lawyer and go there and present everything in a formal legal suit process. What you can do is file a complaint as long as you follow the requirements on a piece of paper along with a copy of your ID and relevant documents, and file it with the ombudsperson office. And in a way, I would say what they do is also play the role of a mediator between government departments which come under the purview and the complainant. We, as quoting the law, about 7-8 years ago, we established a website called mohtasib.pk. And because the official mohtasib offices didn't have technology at their end to enable online submission of complaints. And at that time, by that time, they were tax ombudsperson, they were banking mohtasib, they were harassment at workplace ombudsperson. Now there are about 10 different ombudsperson offices in the country. And it gives me great pleasure. So we ran that response-driven website in English and Urdu for people to generate complaints without knowing the law, without knowing which ombudsperson to go to in case of a particular issue, and file and generate an electronic complaint which could be filed electronically. I'm pleased to say that if you combine, the complaints redressed by these ombudsperson offices, they are close to 100,000 each year in the last few years. Now that's 100,000 cases less on the high courts and on the judiciary, which have been resolved by one or two hearings, or at some times just by the Subai mohtasib or the banking mohtasib issuing a letter, or somebody from their office calling the organization complained against. So technology does play a role, and I think there may not be a very specific mediation process as we think of mediation, but it's certainly mediation from my perspective, and it's leveraged by technology, and you can really resolve it, help things be resolved. If you use eBay and Amazon, they use the concept of online dispute resolution. Now it's really backed by artificial intelligence. There are not many lawyers or mediators or arbitrators resolving those online disputes. It's technology resolving disputes in most cases, and hundreds of thousands of disputes with these platforms are resolved through such mechanisms. So certainly mediation can play a big role. People like me and some others in this room make money from arbitration, but mediation is what can yield faster results, can be modified in cultural context, can be modified in a geopolitical context, and can result in immediate outcomes. In a formal court-mandated, let's say, mediation or institutional arbitration, it can take months, sometimes a year, to appoint mediators and arbitrators and agree on rules to be followed and so on. So things become very structured. In a mediation, whether it's for peace building and dispute resolution or related to BRI disputes, it can be rather quick. You find another international player or a domestic player with a commercial dispute who you both respect or are happy to discuss your sides of the story with and achieve a result. So with that note, I'll end my part, and we look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much for joining.